Us now, one of the Republican congressmen who voted in favor of the president's declaration. He was deployed to the border, we should note, as a member of the Air National Guard. Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois joins us. Congressman, Lieutenant Colonel, thanks for taking the time.
You bet, yeah.
So you said that being deployed down at the border solidified, really, your support for an emergency declaration. We were following your tweets. From there, you tell the story of the Border Patrol rescuing a woman lost in the mountain. You talk about the tracking of coyotes, these people who prey on immigrants coming in. You talk about a big capture of meth. I wonder, though, would a wall help solve any of the problems you were talking about down there?
Yeah, I think it would, Jim, and here's why. So this was my fourth deployment to the border. 3 prior were under President Obama. So to all the governors that are pulling the Guard away from the border, the Guard has nothing to do with the national emergency. That's been going on for about a decade. The Guard is the technology on the border. But what I saw when I was there, and this was my first time doing Arizona, the coyotes, which are the guides paid for by the cartel. The cartel raises money, the Zetas, the Sinaloans, on 2 basic products: drugs and human beings, and they shuffle both of those over the border at great profit. Some through the ports of entry, but a lot through the rugged terrain of the border. So what I saw, if we saw somebody and they heard a helicopter or they thought they were going to be pursued, they'd drop these big bundles. We'd pursue the people. Eventually, maybe the Border Patrol would go back and get the bundles. A lot of the times those had drugs in them. You would see these coyotes abandon a group and leave them out in the middle of a desert where there's no life for 50 miles from there because they're obviously afraid of getting caught, and would leave people out in the to die, which is why you see 200 dead about a year in Arizona. So I came back and said, because of the drugs and the human trafficking, I support it.
Okay, I get that argument. You're making your case here. The president has made that case for really more than 2 years. I've been going back to his election campaign, but the fact is, Congress did not authorize funds for that wall. Both chambers of Congress did not. How is an emergency declaration to get those funds not circumventing what is the constitutional role of Congress?
Well, it's not appropriating new money, and the Anti-Deficiency Act prevents basically the appropriation of new money. Through the emergency powers, I believe, in having read the presidential emergency powers that Congress gave a president, that he has that authority. Now, ultimately, that'll be decided in the courts. They have much more legal experience than I do, but in my read-through of it, he has that authority. That includes the transfer of funds like military construction and counter-drug. I don't think this year he's going to be able to get to all that. The courts have already ruled on this.
You go back to Truman, right? I mean, this is the first time, and I know that folks will say that there have been dozens of emergency declarations since this law was enacted. That is true, but this is the first time a president will declare an emergency after, Congress hasn't stayed silent on this. Congress rejected the president's request for the money he wanted for this. That's the standard the courts established, and the president would be setting new ground here with this declaration.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it may be new grounds in being able to do that. As I read through, it's within his purview to do it. Because, look, I see this, and this is where it all becomes kind of opinion in terms of whether you support a national emergency. I see this as a national security issue. Not, if this was just an issue of immigration, I wouldn't support it. But the other issues I saw, and now the fact, too, outside of the, the legality of it, that we're seeing basically Democratic governors pull their guard back and say, oh, there's no national emergency, so I'm going to withdraw the National Guard that has been here in some cases for a decade. There is no willingness on the other side of the aisle to work with this. I'm for comprehensive immigration reform. I used to be called a liberal or a moderate in my party because I'm for this, but one of the keys to that has to be border security. And my friends on the other side of the aisle think that any National Guard or active duty or any wall is somehow racist and not compassionate. I think it's the opposite. When you have cartels recruiting people to give them their life savings, to take them on a journey that leads to either sexual assault or death in some cases, that's not compassionate. To give hope that they can make it that way instead of the legal and right way and safe way.
Listen, you've done your homework. You've done it wearing the uniform. You went down to the border. I respect your position. I do want to note that you, like many Republicans, when President Obama used executive authority without congressional approval, you opposed it. I'm going to quote from you in 2014 when the president was considering executive action on guns. You said, time and again, the president, this being Obama, has chosen to push his authoritative agenda with little regard for constitutional process. Why is the president not doing exactly what you criticized President Obama for?
Because you can't change a law on guns or immigration with the stroke of a pen. If somebody was trying to change a law, that would be a very different situation than a president saying, I'm declaring a national emergency on the border. I'm not appropriating new money out of thin air. I'm actually switching resources from things like DOD counter drug to actually fighting drugs on the border through this emergency order. And it's focused on things that are a threat to the American people. Is there always consistency among Republicans and Democrats? No, that's something we have to accept. But in terms of what I say and what I see, I think it is consistent to oppose a president that would attempt to change a law versus a president that would attempt to take existing resources and enforce a thing like border security.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger, thanks for joining us.
Anytime.